I'm one of the operations managers at Naturetrek. I've been working there for around about 7 years now, and I've been very fortunate enough to be able to head out on a number of trips. So the two trips I'm going to be talking to you about this evening are our two Indonesia cruises, Bali to Komodo and Raja Ampat. And I have had the privilege of being able to go out on both of these trips over the last few years. So Indonesia is a very large country. It spans over 3,000 miles, which is about 5,000 kilometers, and that's about an eighth of the world's kind of circumference round. So it really does take up quite a lot of space in the world, and it's made up of over 17,000 different islands. So it's an awful lot of places to be able to visit. So if you start down towards the west of this map, you'll see Bali right down in the bottom corner there, and then over on the east of the country, you'll see the Bird's Head of West Papua, which is where Raja Ampat is. So I'll start with our Bali to Komodo trip. As the name suggests, one of the things that many people want to see on this trip is the Komodo dragons. But there's so much more to this trip as well. There are many, many things to see other than just the dragons. At the start of the trip, we fly into Bali, into Denpasar Airport. And we often run either a pre or post-tour extension to Bali Barat National Park. But there's many options for people to extend different parts of Indonesia or Bali itself, either before or after the main tour as well. Generally, we tend to overnight there. And then we get on the boat and we head across Wallace's Line to the east, and then coming up the northern shore of Lombok and Sumbawa over towards Komodo and Rinca. Sometimes we run the trip as a one-way trip and we finish at Maimir, which is right towards the east of this map. And then other times we'll come round towards Komodo and Rinca, and then make our way back towards Bali again, depending on the boat schedule that we have. So a little bit about the extension that we do. Bali Barat National Park is up in the northwest of Bali, and we stay at the lovely Menjangan Resort. Some of the key species that we'll want to see up here is the Bali starling. It's one of the few remaining populations that there are, but there's plenty of other species to be seen as well, such as the coppersmith barbet and collared kingfisher. There's also a nice covered tower that overlooks the forest. Great place to look out and a wonderful way to finish the day with perhaps some pre-dinner drinks. For those people who are flying into Denpasar, we always have an overnight there, and we generally find a local hotel that's got some lovely grounds that we can relax in and enjoy the beach from as well. We can find quite a bit of wildlife here too. It's quite a lot of garden area, and the little Javamunia that you can see in the top right quite often comes down to feed on the seed head type things, and you'll often hear the yellow-crested cockatoos around the trees, and they'll often have a nest hole in one of those as well. Our home for the time when we're on board the boat is one of two sister ships, but normally the Mermaid 1. They both got a very similar setup. This particular boat is a 28-metre twin-engine vessel. It's got 8 cabins for guests, so there's generally 13 in the group, plus 2 leaders, one of whom is Chas Anderson, who is a renowned marine biologist. Once we get on board the boat, we leave the port and we start seeing various seabirds as we go, often terns, such as this greater crested tern, and perhaps some more pelagic species, such as the Bulwer's petrel. It's most likely that we'll cross the Lombok Strait overnight. We might start picking up some cetaceans just out of Bali, but it's likely to be the following morning we'll start seeing those. And quite often we'll come across the energetic spinner dolphins. If they're in a playful mood, they'll quite often come and bowride on the boat and allow us to have a fantastic, really close view of them. They're often in fairly large groups, and these are dolphins that are known for their acrobatics. Quite often they'll be able to jump out the water and sometimes spin several full spins round in the same jump. And as Tim said, one of the reasons that they think they do this, because it's very energy expensive for them, is to try and get rid of pests like the remora that can often be seen on them. Spinning dolphins, it's been shown that at least 40% of them have been known to have remoras on them. So that's one of the reasons they think they do it. Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins are also possible, as are the lovely pantropical spotted dolphins as well. So generally on a typical day, we'll have a morning snorkel or perhaps an island visit. After that, we'll head out into the deeper water to do some cetacean watching and also look out for various seabirds as we go. And then head back into towards the shallower waters in the afternoon, either for another snorkel or for another island visit again. As well as the mammals and birds that we're seeing above the water, there's plenty of life below the waves as well. Indonesia sits within the Coral Triangle, which means it's one of the most marine diverse areas in the world, and there's thousands of fish species here, literally thousands of fish species. So it takes a little while to get your eye in and to work out what you're seeing. Some of the species that we quite frequently see are the freckled hawkfish, the one in the top left. It's also called Forster's or black-sided hawkfish, depending which part of the world you're in, and they quite often sit on a bit of coral like a hawk would in a tree. If the light's right, you can get a lot of colour on some of the fish, and the blue-girdled angelfish is one of the very nice ones to be able to see. We can also find quite a few different eels, and this white-mouthed Murray was showing itself quite nicely coming out of a hole, but other times all you'll see of them is just the front of their mouth as they're gulping water in to pass air over their gill regions. And some of the little species you'll see are nudibranchs or sea slugs. One morning we might visit the island of Satonda. This is a volcanic crater lake. It's got very saline water, and people aren't exactly sure why it's so salty in there, when typically you'd find an inland lake being freshwater. There's a lot of theories about it, but no one actually knows for sure. Heading out each day, we'll be cruising and looking out for cetaceans, and sometimes we come across pods of whales logging on the surface, such as these melon-headed whales. So as the name suggests, they've got fairly rounded heads, and they're often going to be spending part of their day conserving energy and having a bit of a rest on the surface of the water. Some of the seabirds that we might find are phalaropes again here, red-necked phalarope in their winter plumage, not often in such big flocks here, so it can be a little bit tricky to pick out through the waves, but a bit of a flutter of motion will sometimes give away their position. Or perhaps some of the flotsam floating past will have various terns perched on them, such as these bridled terns. Heading on to an afternoon snorkel, it's not always going to be on what we consider a typical reef. Sometimes we're finding a wall that's got soft corals, sea fans and sponges growing along it. These can often be nice and brightly coloured, just because of the way the different creatures utilise the space. Along with fish, we might find some different types of species as well, perhaps individual or groups of squid. There'll quite often be sharks, such as this white-tipped reef shark. They got a bit of a surprise when it came out of a gap in the coral and found all of us floating above it. There's turtles here, mainly green turtles or hawksbill turtles, and quite a number of rays as well, including the large manta rays, which is always a favourite for people to see as well. One morning we'll obviously visit Komodo National Park, the home of the largest living lizard. These grow up to 3 meters in length or 10 feet, weighing in at up to 166 kilograms or 366 pounds for the larger males. So we definitely need to treat them with respect, particularly since their saliva is venomous. So we always are escorted by a ranger while we're here to make sure that we are staying safe. There's lots of other things to see along the islands as well while we're there, and as we walk around we'll be looking out for species such as the flame-breasted sunbird, or perhaps the black-naped oriole, both of which can sometimes be higher up in the trees, but the flashes of colour you get from them give away where they are. The Komodo orchid will also provide a bit of a splash of colour, and might be found within a tree branch area where we are as we're walking along the paths. Scratching noises from the side might indicate the presence of orange-footed scrubfowl. And in the evenings, we might perhaps take one of the rib boats from the big vessel we're traveling on and head along the shoreline, looking out for wildlife there, including Komodo dragons, which will quite often come down to bask on the beach, but perhaps monkeys or wild pigs as well. Rinch is another island which is nearby, and sometimes we'll also visit that for Komodo dragons as well, and perhaps a chance to take a walk around. And the scenery is also pretty fantastic. It's mainly volcanic, so you can see a very different type of look to the landscapes than you get in other places. Many of the volcanoes are in varying stages. Some are extinct, some are dormant, and some are still relatively active. As we head along the open waters, we'll be carrying on looking for more cetacean species, and the other dolphins we might find in this region are Fraser's dolphin or perhaps Risso's dolphin. These range in colour from dark grey for the younger ones and the females, up to almost pure white for the males, particularly where they've been fighting and creating scratches and scars along their bodies. We'll also be looking out for larger species of cetacean too, including some of the baleen whales. And the way we go along for this cruise happens to be on the migration route for blue whales. At this time of year, they're often heading from the Banda Sea down towards Australia, and coming around through the channels between the islands here is one of the ways that they go. Some evenings, if we're near the shore, we might potentially see some fruit bats heading out for their evening foraging. Some roosts are in very, very large numbers, and it can be very spectacular to see and hear them as they travel overhead. And as Tim was saying, you often get spectacular sunsets when you're out at sea, but spectacular sunsets do mark the end of each day and also mark the end of our time there. Everyone is often getting off the boat wishing they could stay a lot longer and wondering where on earth the last few days have gone to. Heading a bit further to the east, on the opposite side of the archipelago, we've got Raja Ampat. This translates to the Four Kings, which indicates the four main islands which make up this part of the country. So for this trip, we board the boat in Sarong. It's usually the same boat or the sister boat again, and the exact itinerary here is kept a little bit more flexible to make allow us to make the most of the weather, as well as the sightings that we've had. Although the general makeup of the days is very similar to how we run the Bali trips as well. Heading out to Sarong, we'll perhaps start seeing spinner dolphins again. And these ones, you may perhaps start seeing little wounds along some of the dolphins here. And these are caused by a particular type of shark called a cookie cutter shark. As you can see from the name comes from the quite neat type circle that's along there, but not very pleasant for the dolphins that have been the victim of it. Here we do lots of different types of snorkeling. Some of the corals can be a bit different to get in other areas, often quite large plate corals, making up the different types of reef, and very large coral gardens. Again, there'll be lots of colourful fish, like these sargents and silverfish. Some of the fish that you start seeing might be familiar to you, such as the clownfish or anemone fish, often keeping their territories and making sure that no one takes over their home space. One morning we'll have a very, very early start, heading up to the ridge of a nearby island in time to see a bird of paradise lek, particularly the red bird of paradise, where we're hoping that the males will be coming in that morning to display and show off their long tail feathers and colourful plumage. A little bit further along the road, there's a different lek as well for a Wilson's bird of paradise. So we're generally able to fit both of those into the same morning, and if we're fortunate enough, they'll both be at their lekking sites. As we're on the island, we'll also be seeing pigeons and doves, cockatoos, butcherbirds, parrots, and friarbirds. Once we're back on the boat, some of the birds that we might be seeing are frigate birds, a little bit like Tim was mentioning. We get both greater and lesser frigate birds in this area. But one of the things we're hoping to see as we're heading back out is the baleen whales. On the last trip we did here, we had two main species that we were looking at. The Amura's whale. This particular species is only recognised as a separate species within the last 20 years, which for a 12-metre animal is something that's quite amazing. We also get a breeder's whale here, and as Tim was saying, it's got a third rostral ridge if you can get close enough to be able to see that. It's very similar in size and shape to Amura's, but you need some subtle differences within there. I'm hoping I'll be able to share a short video with you of our whale watching experiences out there. There's something quite amazing about being able to work out where and the anticipation of the whales coming up in just the right place to watch them, and being able to share those few moments with them before they go back down to the depths again. So please excuse the background noise. It's just what was going on at the time when we were there. So that was a pair of Amura's whale that we were very fortunate to see. Again, we think it was a mother and calf coming up together since they were travelling so closely side by side. Once we spent the most of the afternoon out in the deeper waters, we'll be heading back into shallower waters for a snorkel again. And there's possibility of some mangrove visits while we're on this particular trip. These have a very different atmosphere to a full-on coral reef, and you'll often get fish hiding within the tree roots and just creating a very different feel to the visit. Again, there's walls around this area where we might find lots of soft coral growth and sponges. These can be very, very colourful, a lot of different pigmentation in them compared to some of the hard corals. And particularly if it's near the surface, like this soft coral on a pier post, they can be very, very intense in colour indeed. We might also get a few surprises. This sea snake certainly surprised me as it swam towards me at one particular point. This is a banded sea crate. And then this particular place as well, we also had quite a lot of nudibranchs along in very varying different types of colours. Nudibranchs are sea slugs, and their name means naked gill, and this refers to the breathing apparatus outside their body, which you can see in sort of feathery type structures on these different individuals. Also get a few other interesting things as we head around. This is a star pufferfish, and there are map pufferfish in the area as well. Not quite a round ball as the guinea fowl pufferfish that Tim had, but definitely big and puffed up nonetheless. Rays, including manta rays, but varying types of stingray as well, can be seen during this trip, such as this white-tailed stingray here. And also sharks. This black-tip reef shark, there was a few of them this day, and they were particularly interested in something on the back of our boat. But you can also get a few more interesting ones, such as this tasseled wobbegong, which is a type of carpet shark. Again, some wonderful scenery to be seen as we head around, some amazing geological features on the different islands, and some fantastic coloration as we go from the bright green vegetation on shore to the sort of turquoisey waters nearer the sandy beaches, right through to the deep blue water of the sort of deeper ocean areas. So really spectacular scenery to be seen there as well. And again, finishing on a lovely sunset, some beautiful coloration we get there. And if you're very fortunate, you might get some dolphins playing through the sunset as well. So just really quickly, Few dates for 2024 for both of these trips, and also a quick plug, we've got a very similar trip that we're going to be running in 25 to the Solomon Islands. Information to follow shortly, so if you're interested, please do register interest in that, and thank you very much. Please let me know if you've got any questions.